Wanda, what is your best technique to teach a kid to fly fish?
Well, it depends how old the child is, of course. With a 5-year-old, you have a 3-minute attention span. 6-year-old, you may have 5-minute attention span. 7-year-old, you may have 10-minute attention span. So you have to kind of know where you're coming from with a child, and they're all different. Some were born old school. Some were, are just the typical kid, and you have to, understand that first. And I always try to do games. Like kids love games, and if you've got a reward after they make a cast to a fake fish and actually hit their target, then they get a reward of some kind. And then we do hula hoop games where they kind of have to cast through the hoop. They don't know that's a big deal, but if they make it and hit the fish on the other side, then they get another reward. And normally, the first sessions are always short unless I have parents in participation with this instruction. And I've had plenty of school children classes where the parents all want to participate. So I teach the parents how to teach their children how to fly cast. And that's all with games. And they all walk away with, thank you, I've got new skills and I know how to take this home and do it in small increments. So that's the key right there with kids.
Well, I've got about a 3-minute attention span myself, and I like games, and I like to cuts for rewards. So you probably
don't we all?
Yeah, probably be better to teach me with the kid approach. Definitely my
gummy worms.
Yeah, gummy worms. And yeah, that's like a great either that or wine, one of the two. I don't know. We don't want to give kids wine, but
no,
some kind of give me some kind of reward. But
yeah,
that's so your approach there is that's a holistic look at it.
Yeah.
Of the different ages require different things to motivate them and reward them. And definitely you want to know that, all right, just because this young person is 11 years old, maybe they have a short attention span, and maybe you have to do something a little different. It's good to kind of have those, to block that off into those types of 3 minutes, 5 minutes, that sort of thing. And these rewards and the different games is a good idea. And I usually just try to hit this spot, try to hit this, cast your brains out until you get tired, and then then let's start working on this.
They love the circle. I make a big circle, and I have fish at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, all the way to 12 o'clock. And if you make the whole circle and hit every fish, you get a hat or you get a something, and they get in competition with each other. And it really is, they're accomplishing cool things on how to hit a target in any direction, and they don't know it.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. That you're right. Yeah. They do like that competition with themselves sometimes, depending on the kid.
Definitely.
It's with them. It's really cool when they accomplish whatever it is that you've set in front of them. It's cool to see them accomplish that, whatever it is, small or big. The first fish that they catch is a big deal. It's a big deal. I took a trip with a guy and his son. His son was probably 10, 11, something like that. And at first the trip started out with, I don't know where the fish were, but evidently our bugs didn't taste good to him. As soon as he hooked that first fish and caught it, got it to the net, his whole demeanor changed.
Absolutely, it does.
It was cool because he was, then it went into, well, Dad, I caught one. When are you going to catch one?
Right. And that happens a lot when I have fathers and daughters and mothers and sons and that kind of thing. But, the sad thing is a lot of times they don't want to touch it. I mean, when it comes in, they're terrified. So you have that whole other teaching thing about how to release properly and it's not going to die. And, so it's a life learning experience.
Yeah. And you're not going to grow scales just because you touched it.
No.
From high atop the world headquarters of Southeastern Fly, this is the Southeastern Fly podcast. Thanks for joining us on this episode. Feel free to share the episode with your friends and fishing partners. Subscribe and follow so you'll be the first to know when an episode drops. If you find value in the podcast, drop by the Southeastern Fly store and explore the merch that fuels this podcast. Fly fishing coaching sessions are open. I've got 2 slots open. If you want additional information, about fly fishing techniques, flies, fly tying, gear, destinations, shoot me a text or an email and we'll get you started. That's just in time for spring fishing. So who's our guest today on Southeastern Fly? She's been a professional guide and casting instructor since the 1980s. She's been a featured angler or a host in magazines, on radio, television, video, and computer fly fishing games. She was a guest on episode 4 of the Southeastern Fly podcast. She's a pro staff member of Patagonia, Chota, Maven Fly, Native Eyewear, and Aqua Design. Currently, she's teaching private casting instruction and instructional guiding on the Hiwassee River near Reliance, Tennessee. She's an outdoor writer for Dun Magazine, Girls, Guns, and Rods. She's a women's casting instructor for the Virginia Fly Fishing Wine Festival. She's also a board member and retreat leader for Casting Carolinas. She offers private casting instruction, 1 day on the water casting and angling schools, group schools called From Zero to Hero, 2-day fly fishing schools with guided fishing. She's got an advanced 1-day school for fresh and saltwater destinations. Please welcome back to the podcast, Wanda Taylor. Wanda, thanks for stopping back by.
Well, thanks for inviting me again. It's been too long.
It has been too long. The last time that we talked, we were in Chattanooga. It was raining like crazy. And we were at the
Conservancy,
yes.
Yeah.
Down on the river next to Baylor School.
That is one cool facility. I mean, to see all those brook trout that they're rearing and this new sturgeon, I mean, it was just really very impressive to me, and how they're involving the local college students and high school students in that.
And interestingly enough, the sturgeon was one of the things that I picked. I thought that'd be really cool to catch on the fly. And I've had 2 encounters with sturgeon, not sturgeon. I had 2 encounters with sturgeon since then. One was I was actually on the river with Susan Thrasher, and about a 3-foot sturgeon just jumped straight up out of the water, but it couldn't really move its head down. It just kind of like jumped up, and when the tail got almost out of the water, it just fell over on its side. Because it had too much weight.
I just wanted to tell you hello.
Yeah, right. And it wasn't too far from the boat. It was far enough to where, you could hear it. But
oh yeah.
The second time was we had a really clear water day, and the folks that I was guiding took them to a particular place and stopped. And I was like, all right, so throw it right there by that log. And I thought, there's not a log there. Why is there a log right in the middle of the stream, right in the middle of the current? And it was a sturgeon just laying there. I mean, it was
real
clear as a bell too. It was really cool to see. So since that day that you and I met over there on the Tennessee River, those are my 2 encounters that I've had since then. And one of them, I would have still been wondering what it was, but the second one, once I dialed it in, I knew they've been really doing some really good work there. So,
oh, definitely they have. And it's so neat to know how long they live. I mean, they can be 100 years old, 150 years old. I mean, they just keep growing bigger and bigger as long as you release them.
Yeah, right. Well, like I said, I haven't had a chance to really fish for one on the fly yet, but I'm waiting for that day that we hook one and get to see one up close and personal like that.
Well, good luck on that.
Yeah. I'm sure that would be a lifelong pursuit right there, in a total accident when it happens, but that's okay.
Well, I've seen a couple of them on television when those big game hunters and stuff have, gone after them. Their quest is big fish. And it really is phenomenal. I'm not sure what they're using, probably half a chicken or a rabbit.
Yeah.
But
right.
I mean, they could be vegetarian. I really don't know.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that they're going to hit a blue wing olive or anything, but still.
Yeah, I doubt it.
Oh,
since they have a turned down mouth, we know they're bottom feeders.
Yeah, right. They're not going to come up that high, but anyway. Yeah. Well, hey, just for the audience here, a little bit of a backstory on how this episode originated. So this topic actually originated. The idea, everything originated on the Fly Fishing Podcast by Southeastern Fly group on Facebook. So our Facebook group, somebody posed the question out there or asked a question about teaching people to fly fish. And I think they said, hey, what about kids specifically? Then Wanda and I talked, and we said, well, maybe we can expand it a little bit to look into kids, but also break it up and expand that just a little to where we kind of grouped it in 3 categories. And I'll get to that in a minute. This particular subject, I've been through it. When I first started, I had been fishing about 1.5 years, so I knew everything.
Without a doubt.
Oh, yeah, totally. I'd caught like 10 fish or whatever.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. How much more do you really need to know? So I took a friend of mine to the river, and I had an extra pair of waders, extra pair of boots, extra rod, reel, even an extra vest. And I gave that to him. I gave him some flies. And I marched him out on a gravel bar, and I stood him there and I said, here's how you cast, which was about probably a 10-second instruction. And we corrected nothing whenever he started. I stayed there, but I probably honestly worked with him maybe 10 minutes. And then I said, all right, you're ready to go. And then I was in such a hurry to get off and go fish that I just kind of left him and forgot about him, and he didn't catch anything.
Oh,
yeah,
surprise.
Right. Yeah, I know. I was stunned. So I knew it had to be him. I knew it was his problem, not mine. Later, we went back and he did catch some fish, but it was me being in such a hurry to get away to go catch a fish that I didn't spend the proper amount of time. Whatever that was, I wasn't even ready to spend the proper amount of time with him. I mean, that never entered my mind, because all I wanted to do was get him standing on the right gravel bar, let him swing a soft tackle, and let him catch a fish. That's really that's what I was all about. My approach was totally wrong, but I had never been taught how to teach. And I never stopped long enough to know that it's a little bit different than doing it yourself. And I frankly probably wasn't ready to teach anybody to fly fish anyway.
Those things kind of run under one headline, but they're not. Learning how to fly fish to fish, and then learning how to fly casts are two separately different venues. And trying to do that in 30 seconds, man, you're like superhero.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, my results showed that I wasn't superhero. I was a dud.
Yeah. So anyway, there's casting, and which is, the better you can cast, the more that you can put it near the target. But then there's fishing techniques, which some are naturals and some will never get it, but they can acquire it by, developing it on time on the water. But they're two different subjects. But when you marry the two, that's a beautiful thing to watch.
It really is. When somebody gets it all, that's when it's great. It's fantastic to see, they went through the whole process of getting the line in the air all the way through to releasing the fish. It's awesome. It really is fun to watch a progression.
Yeah, it takes time.
It does take time. Time is one thing that we're going to talk about here too a little more.
Yeah.
We say, Wanda, let's break this down. Break our answers into 3 groups, and let's approach it from you're working with a young person, a grown person, including men and women, because they can be a little bit different. Men think they can watch one YouTube video and they got it, and women are more likely to listen. And I've seen that. I see that time and time again. And then let's take another group of a senior person, because their needs are actually a little different than a grown person. A grown person is a little bit different than a young person. A lot of times I think I used to try to put them all in one group. And then as I started picking them out, I think my teaching techniques changed a little bit. And from what little bit you and I have talked, yours are, although maybe different, you're breaking them out kind of that same way. Well, let's talk about where the best place to teach someone to fly fish is. And let's start with the young person.
If you're talking about fly fishing now, or are you talking about fly casting?
Let's take casting first.
Okay, casting can be done in a school gym. It can be done in your backyard. It can be done on a pond. Just anywhere you have space and attention, a place where it's quiet, where someone can hear you and they're not distracted.
I teach in the boat almost all the time. That's just how I prefer to do it. I've got kind of control over, if I've got 2 people, I've got kind of control over, all right, you're not going to get, 200 yards downstream. I don't want to chase you down. That's the perspective that I normally take. But every once in a while, I'll work with somebody, like over here on the football field, if the football team's not playing, obviously, or soccer team, for the casting portion of it. I get in the front yard if the grass is mowed lower. That's a big deal to me, is not getting, knots hanging on grass and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on water loading, picking a line up off the water and picking it off the front yard? Do you think there's any advantage or disadvantage to not being on the water?
There's advantage to being on the water, especially if it's moving water. But the problem is, once you have moving water, and if you're actually using a real fly and you actually hook one, then you've lost your student. I mean, forever. Yeah. So I never put a fly on, and no matter where it is, just for safety reasons, but mainly for that. We practice on targeting, and then I practice on how to set the hook, and then how to let the fish run, and how to, go through the whole scenario of the real water thing. And then the next step, of course, would be to put them on moving water. And I actually have that to happen, and then put those skills to work, application of those skills. So it's kind of a process, and you're trying to do it all in one because you don't have a choice. You're a guide, you're a classroom in yourself, and it has to be a fast speed. I don't really know how to fly fish. I just want to catch fish. Basically, is what a lot of the new anglers want. But this whole new generation, especially since we've had COVID, is they want to be outside, and they're serious about doing family things together.
Yes.
They want to include their children, they want to include their grandchildren, and they want to have something that's going to make them get away from video games and all this stuff that takes up so much of our time, like Facebook, Instagram, that kind of thing. And I'm finding I'm having more families lately, and the past 2 years, and it's been delightful.
I'm seeing that too. A lot of trips are father, son, father, daughter, mother, daughter, a couple of those. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're right there. Everybody's wanting to get out and get away, but they want to take their family with them. And I think that's a plus. I think that's a great thing.
It's a huge plus. I'm seeing the grandsons now referring their grandmothers to me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Grandma has a place somewhere and they want to go fish in Jackson Hole or whatever. And Wanda, you got to get her ready. Mm-hmm. I love it when you have a 15-year-old send you a message.
Yeah, that's a cool thing right there.
It's a very cool thing.
I've had many a good days in the boat with my grandparents, and
that's fantastic.
I probably wasn't the best student, but I mean, I still liked it,
Oh yeah, me too. I grew up with my grandmother's taught me how to fish, not fly fish, but to fish, and I will treasure that value in my life forever.
Oh yeah.
They open the outdoors to me, and something that I just love.
That's a whole other episode for me. For sure. So on the casting part, you can do that about anywhere. You mentioned, and I agree, that being on the water is the best place to teach the fishing part. And
if they're going to be freshwater fishers, if they're going to be bass fishers, not so much. You got to find out, are they going to saltwater? It's totally different venues of what their species are going to be in their backyard, and that's where I start. Like, what can you easily go fish for in your backyard, and I'm going to teach you those skills. And so that's where we go, because if I taught them freshwater, moving water, and they have a lake where they're going to the ocean, it's just a totally different techniques. And you have to start there. But yours is mainly is on the river, so you know what your venues are.
Yeah, and I've got access to some lakes, some private lakes too, for bass, for largemouth. And you're right, that's a totally different thing. It involves stripping and that's totally different than fishing a moving stream, a moving river. With the bass lakes, I love to fish them with poppers. So casting with some distance, but more so with some accuracy is super important on that. And then, the stripping techniques, just whatever it happens to be the flavor of the day as far as what the fish are eating. So,
with bass, though, you're going to want the rod tip down and you want to strip strike. Mm-hmm. With the trout, not so much. And so, when I teach someone on a lake and then they go to a river out west and they say, I didn't know there's so many ways you could fish. And they go out there and these guys are making them high stick. What I taught them as far as capturing or catching a fish was wrong. But all they hired me for was to teach them to cast. They didn't tell me where they were going. And that's where it gets very difficult. That's the first question I ask. And it's important and pertinent, actually, for them to be successful. Like, all right, tell me where you're going next and we'll figure this out.
And you're exactly right. If you're bass fishing, your rod tips down almost in the water, sometimes in the water.
Yeah, it has to be.
Stripping, right.
Yeah,
so,
and you don't ever do a trout rise. If you do, you lose.
Yeah, right. That makes tarpon guides really happy when you do that.
Oh, they hate you.
They don't like you, but probably 50% of their business comes from people that trout fish. So
yeah, but they're I had a kid last week, or young man. He's not a kid, young man, and he's gone 2 years in a row, and he's hooked up, but he never captured a tarpon. And what I found out at the end, once we got his double haul timing right, he didn't know how to strip strike properly. Mm-hmm. He didn't know how to set the hook in a tarpon, just like you would in a bass. I mean, you can't kill. They have rubber Tupperware lips. Mm-hmm. Trout, no. No, he's going to be magic. I mean, next week he's going to rule Tarpon Kingdom, and I can't wait to hear about it.
Nice. For the folks that are out there listening and thinking they might have somebody that they want to teach to fly fish, if they're going to do what you do all the time, that's pretty easy topic to to teach on. But if they're going to do something different, like you're a freshwater small stream angler and, y'all are going to Louisiana for redfish and you've never done that, there's a whole other way to teach that. So, I don't know how much energy you want to expend to teach them to fly fish or even, casting will be okay. And if you're going to Louisiana, you want an 8 or a 10 weight normally. So, make sure you've got one of those in their hand. If you're teaching dry flies on a small stream, that's a whole other technique and a whole other way. You know what? One of the most interesting redfish questions I've heard, and I didn't realize I was hearing it. I've heard it every time I've been, and I always ask it if I can't see the fish, which as you get a little up in age, maybe my sight's not quite as good as it was 20 years ago. I'm sure of it. But which way is that fish pointed? That makes a big difference on where you're going to drop that fly. Accuracy is king.
It is, and if you're fortunate to see the tail of the fish, then he's the redfish, they're bottom feeders. So as long as you get pretty close to the tail, and you can tell with the movement of the water what direction they're going. So it's not that big a deal. But most of them are because they're foraging.
Yeah, unless it's really cold.
Yeah. The thing is your redfish in Louisiana or are they in South Carolina? Or are they in Florida? Those are all 3 different animals and they respond totally differently. I would teach 3 different ways. If they were, I'd have to find out what location they were going.
But if you're just getting into the basics and it's casting and pie plates work well, small stuffed fish like you have probably work well. Same thing, those are some techniques that you can prep people on, but until you see the situation for yourself, it's going to be a little bit difficult to give them everything they need. But let's move on to the next question, Wanda. And this has to do more with the length of time. And so young folks, grown folks, and senior folks is what we're going to talk about here. How much time do you think we should set aside to teach somebody to fly fish, to fish from start to finish, meaning let's go with the casting piece and the catching piece?
Well, you're combining the two and they're not the same. So if you're talking children, adults, or seniors.
So let's go with young folks first, and then we'll go to adults and then seniors.
Kids, it's pretty easy. If you could put a woolly booger or a nymph on and let them troll around a lake, they're going to catch something. So the skill level is roll cast, pretty much just how to get it out there. And then if they catch one and they want to try maybe a topwater fly like a frog or something like that, you got to have a little bit more skills because it's a bigger, aerodynamic fly going through the water. So that's going to take a little bit more time on how to present it and how to get it out of the water. And that'll incorporate having water hauls or double hauls to do that. On the river, if you're going for, big trout, same thing. You got stock trout, like on most of our southeastern rivers. And then you go out west or you go to Alaska and they're like total different animals. So you still have to have those same skills that you would learn for bass fishing because they're huge.
So for a young person zones out completely, especially with kids. When they start zoning out, it may be a good time to stop and do something a little different, although keeping them engaged. Maybe chasing a frog is a good idea. Maybe, getting out and turning over some rocks if you're on the river is a great idea, especially if you can find some different bugs that they can look at. You can look at rocks. You can do a lot of things, keeping them engaged in the outdoor experience, but giving them a breather on the casting or the catch or the fishing.
Yeah, I do girls on the water, and girls on the water every age from 5 to 16. And I always end up with the little ones, the little babies. They're so cute. I mean, they walk out there with their little waders, and it's like, so do fish poop in the water? And of course, you have to tell them they do, and they start backing up, wanting off the river. And then, they'll show them some bugs to keep them interested. And then all of a sudden, we'll see a trout, and it's like, whoa, yeah, and everything changes. But it goes from curiosity to being terrified with kids, and it's the most awesome experience. I love working with them; they're so fun. But it has to be a short time. Once they decide that they've had it. So let's go for ice cream. I mean, no parent or grandparent should push them through something like that. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, when it's time, when they're done, if you, absolutely take them for ice cream. That will be the part that they remember, sitting there talking to you, and y'all can reflect a little bit, not a ton. You don't have to critique everything they did, but especially if they catch a fish, they'll want to talk about that. There's a lot of things that come out in that conversation after the lesson or conversation after fishing, for sure, with young kids. And I still remember some things from my grandparents, and that was double-digit years ago. Let's just put it that way. As far as a grown, let's take an adult next and just talk about them. How much time do you set aside for them? Do you try to put it all in 1 hour? I have 8 hours, 6 or 8 hours, or 4 hours sometimes to go through the whole process with them. And yours is maybe a little different.
I've lived through that as a person, as a angler trying to figure it out. And to take someone that's beginning for a whole day on the water is you're just exhausted. You don't even know what you're doing. But an hour and then say, hey, let's go to lunch is great. And so all of my sessions are 1 hour. And then I can start seeing fatigue happen. When fatigue starts happening, then casts go bad. And then they think they're horrible at this sport. So I stop it right there. And I send them, notes later on, this is what we need to work on for the next session to help you progress. And adults are especially different because they choose to be there. They're not brought there by a parent or a grandparent, and they choose to be there, and they're paying good money for it. And so then after we get the accomplishments they want, then we do the on-water application, no matter if it's fresh water, salt water, warm water, on how to make this work now. So it's a process.
Like I said earlier, I've been teaching a couple of seniors to fish, and I noticed they get a little tired. And I let up on them for a little bit, and we sit down, and they have plenty to talk about. You can learn so much from them. Maybe not about fishing, but life in general. That 15 minutes of conversation passes by before you know it, and then they're rested a little bit, feeling a little good. That gives me time to go back and say, all right, what did I see there, and am I hitting on what I need to hit on? And then I can tell them, hey, we're going to work on this now. We make that change. They're a little bit more fresh, and like you say, they're not so worn out that they start getting a little into some bad habits because they're worn out. So I think that the seniors are even a little bit different. I don't know what you find with them, but that was just one of the recent things that
Well, yeah, they're totally different. And I'm in that category. I mean, you start losing muscle mass, you start losing muscle memory, and your responses are slower.
Right.
You have to approach that in a totally different way. I have seniors that want me to help them work through a process to be a certified instructor. And this is at 70 or 75, and they're retired World War II I pilots. I'm serious. And, these are very accomplished human beings. And so you understand that they're used to being the top of the best. And now they understand that their bodies won't perform that. So I've learned through working with Project Healing Waters with our veterans, women and men, different ways to help them produce the cast through using their body core. Like instead of using your elbow in your arm, your forearm to do that, stick it into your gut and turn the body itself with the rod so they can support that cast and help them to present the cast. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. And they have no fatigue whatsoever. They still know how to strike. I have a couple of blind people, and they do the same thing. They've been fisher people their whole life, but they know how to do it by feel, but their structure and their muscles have changed. So we've kind of restructured their casting techniques.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that, because I did that just the other day. Of this guy had a shoulder injury. A lot of us have shoulder injuries. If you row a boat, he doesn't row a boat, but he's got that shoulder injury. And I said, let's just, instead of using your arm and your shoulder and all that, I said, let's start just trying to use your body, which was totally foreign to him because he had learned to fish with his arm and his shoulder, and the
traditional way, the 10 to 2 way. Well, that's over. It's time to learn something new that's going to work for you in this period of your life, and that's the way I approach it. And they're all responsive, myself too.
Yeah,
I mean, just learning to do even blue water with sailfish and marlin and stuff. Same things. Everything is changing because our equipment is becoming so high tech that you really don't fight the fish anymore. You just don't. And once it finally tires out, then as a senior, it's my time to capture.
Yeah.
That fish has worn down and he is mine. And learning new techniques of how to make what you love to do, like tarpon fishing. I have a guy that, he's lost the use of his legs. So we put the wheelchair on there, and
Mhm.
teaching him how to cast sitting down, the same thing he's done his whole life. And his goal after his stroke was to catch one last tarpon. And by golly, he did. But we had to adjust the way he casts. And it's an individual skill you have to learn, I think, with each person.
Yeah, you're right. You change as time goes, and some of the younger people are like, I'll never have to worry about that. Trust me, you will have to worry about this. and you'll need to know you'll see it in yourself a little bit too, of, okay, well, this isn't exactly working for me.
Well, especially like wade fishing. Most of the time your knees, a lot of people that are tall or have osteoarthritis, your knees go. And so wade fishing sometimes is out of the future for you. But being in a boat is, you could fish as long as you can, or a wheelchair, just roll me out there. I'm good. Yeah.
I fished a guy that had use of one arm, and that was it. And he used a reel where you pull the trigger on the reel, and it
an automatic. How awesome!
Auto reel, and he would. I mean, he was pretty dang good, actually.
That's
and
great.
He'd cast out. He'd mend. He could do whatever you asked him to do.
Yeah.
Short of, when it came time to fight the fish, the only way he could fight the fish was to set the hook, bring it tight, and then whenever he wanted to gain line, he would have to point that rod tip down and pull the trigger and come back up with it. He has his own little system. Yeah. Which made me get my butt out of the boat almost every time and go down and get, downstream of the fish and get it in the net, so he didn't have to work so hard. But
there you go. That's what you do.
Didn't hurt me.
No. All in a guide's day, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no doubt. So we've hit the young, the grown person, and the seniors on a few questions here. So this one is near and dear to a lot of folks' heart. Let's talk about teaching family to fly fish. And I remember Lefty saying one time, I can teach any woman to fly fish as long as she isn't my wife, or something to that effect. Maybe
as long as I'm not married to her. That's
as long as I'm not married to her. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely right. And Joan Wolfe did the same thing, because Lee Wolfe tried to teach Joan how to fly an airplane, and they almost crashed. It wasn't what he said, it's how he said it, dear. Right. And so she landed that plane and hired her own instructor. And so anytime you're emotionally involved with any family member, don't even try. I mean, just don't even try. I mean, our son, who is an excellent fly angler and caster, would not learn from his father and I, because he thought he had to be perfect in our sight. Mm-hmm. And it was too overwhelming for him. So we can all fish together now. It's not a problem.
That's nice.
But but it's hard with the husbands and wives and children and fathers. And so it's always good to have an outsider to kind of intervene there. For some reason, they'll listen to someone else before they'll listen to you, because you're their dad or their mom or they're your husband or wife. So just stay away from that. I encourage anybody who's listening to this, don't even go there.
If a person changed your diaper when you were young, it's probably pretty tough for them to listen to you try to teach them how to fly fish. And that's about the best way I could say that one. But in a young person, I mean, a young person may, they may listen to you. Like, I was pretty fortunate that Delaney listened to me and my daughter listened to me. I already know that I'm not going to try to teach my wife. Not that she wouldn't listen. I would say something stupid probably and ruin it for her. So, and I don't want to do that.
No, you don't. And it's best to stay away if you can. Now, there are a lot of unusual relationships that that fathers and sons and mothers and daughters have, but they're very rare that they really are friends as well as partners in fishing and sports. Yeah. But I say thank God for you guys. I'm glad to know that you're out there, but that's not the norm.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think it is either. And I can give one tip on this one. If you hire a casting fishing instructor, if you hire a guide, and you take whoever you take, if they're in your family, let me qualify that. If they're in your family and you hire a guide to go fish, let the guide or let the instructor instruct. And
absolutely.
It's so hard. I see people struggle with it, and I see people fail at it, and I see the successful ones let you as the instructor say, hey, go ahead and show, junior how you do it. And then they don't feel so defensive that way. That's better
Yeah.
than saying, hey, here's what you do. I've been in there and I'm like, hey, you just sit back there and shut up because you're not helping.
Well, yeah, I have casting classes a lot with groups like that. And I have the husbands and the wives and the boyfriends or whatever. And my first instruction to them is if you are related to someone here emotionally involved, please do not try to teach them during my class the things that I'm trying to teach them. And without a doubt, every time one of them will try to go over and try to teach them how, while I'm away, with some other students. I'll come back and I said, what did I try to tell you? And the wife said, I told him he wasn't supposed to talk to me about this because he was teaching me all wrong. It was totally different than what you had told me. And I said, that's the point.
Right.
So it's just natural because maybe he is her protector or she is his protector. And that's their normal role. And it's hard to walk away from that when you're in an uncomfortable situation when you're learning something new. Let's face it, it is uncomfortable to learn something new. It's out of your venue and you just feel kind of vulnerable. And so absolutely, I try to separate them if I can. And if I don't have the choice, I'm just right up front with it.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the way to be. Anytime I'm more up front, if I can get the experienced angler off to the side and say, hey, just do your thing back there and I'll work with whoever.
There you go.
And because they're probably not going to listen to you anyway, especially if they're in their teens like I was. There's no way I would have listened I probably wouldn't have the sense to listen to anybody. But
the classic one I had in Virginia was a father-son in this group class of 8. And the father, I told all of them, I said, please don't try to string up your rod or do anything at this point until I talk you through it. And the father just starts doing it. And the son looked over at me and he says, just so you know, he doesn't listen. And the whole hour, he never listened. The son got it. The father never did. It was hysterical. And I said, and you live with this, huh? He said, yep. He said, he's a lawyer. I loved his honesty.
That's funny.
It was funny, but it's the truth.
To all the lawyers out there listening, we're not picking on you. I mean,
no, we love you. It's just
yeah.
Most of you would not do that, right?
This is our last question, and I always ask this question just to give the guest the opportunity to talk about the things that we didn't think of, or that in this case the podcast group didn't think of, that would be of value when you're trying to teach somebody to fly fish and to cast or fly fish or both. Let us know this. What should we have asked that we didn't ask?
If you don't bend the tip of the rod, the fly line is not going to unroll, and there's no way you're getting energy to get the fly to the destination. And so the most important thing, if you're going to try to teach a friend, is teach them how to stop the rod either on a 45 degree or a 90 or over the left shoulder or right shoulder. I don't really care, just so that they can see the tip of the rod bend. When they stop the rod, if that rod is not bending, the fly line will never unroll. If the fly line does not unroll, then therefore it doesn't go to its destination and you cannot have a loop. So that's the first thing. If you're teaching someone else to cast and to fish, because it's going to send that fly to wherever you want it to go, is if they stop, speed up and stop abruptly, but enough energy in it that it bends the tip of the rod, whether it's the back cast or the forward cast or a roll cast, it doesn't really matter. The tip has to bend. In English, say you have to bend the bloody rod. You want to hit it so hard that you bend that bloody rod. Well, I kind of agree with them. If the tip does not bend, the energy doesn't go anywhere, and you'll never get the fly out to the destination. So I think that's one key thing. However you the analogies you come up with, like my kids say, is that like throwing a tater off a fork? And I said, well, I never thought about that, but yeah. Well, how about a marshmallow that's on fire? You want to get rid of it. Yeah. Some people call it, doing paint in the ceiling. Whatever analogy you want to use to help your friend to understand the speed up and stop of the power of the back cast and the forward cast, it's all gravy.
That's really a good one. I don't know how many times I say, look over your right shoulder. and watch that line and watch the rod tip, watch the rod bend, watch the line unfold, so you get an idea of what it is that's going on back there.
If you take it on a 45-degree and do it on a level plane like a side cast, they can visually see the back cast and the forward cast. And once they visually see it, no matter if it's overhead cast they do or left shoulder cast, it doesn't matter. They actually understand what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
That 10 to 12, 1 to 5, whatever clock is that they traditionally taught, you cannot see a back cast over your head backwards. You just cannot. But once you understand what you're trying to have it to do and how it feels, once you understand those two things, it is an awesome thing to watch.
Totally agree. That's a good way to do it. I like that idea. I would say on this, so let me give up my 2.5 cents worth here. If you're going to teach somebody to fly fish, so you think enough of them to want to bring them into the sport that you've chosen to get into. Obviously, if you're going to take the time to fish, teach somebody, then you probably really like their company. If that's the case, don't give them your worst fly rod and fly line setup. Give them something good that they can learn on. A whole lot of folks show up with a really nice rod, maybe not a top of the line of whatever company they choose, but a nice rod, a nice reel, and then they cast. I'm like, well, that was ugly, and it doesn't match what they should be doing. And I would say probably 75% of the time, the fly line is cheap. It's just not a really good line that matches the rod.
Or the fly line is dirty. I mean, if it's dirty, it's not going to go any. I mean, I bring 3 actions of rod to every class that I do. I have a slow rod, a medium rod, and a fast rod. And I experiment with a student and let them use each of those rods. And I said, one of these is going to make you look like a hero.
Mm-hmm.
And that one is the type action rod that you need. If you're a type A personality, if you're a tennis player, a baseball player, you're going to hit that rod like a son of a gun. And so you're going to need something that's fast, that's going to slow you down. If you got a A by B personality, you're going to do everything on a slow, meticulous way. You might want a very slow rod. But if you're kind of in between, which a lot of people are, mid-flex might work for you. Now show them how to detect the action of the rod by bending it on the ground or on the floor to see where that rod bends and to see where the actual structure of the fiberglass and the graphite is on that rod. And so they have a total understanding. I said, I don't care whose rod you buy, just go into the fly shop and try each of these actions, and we'll determine today exactly which one's best for you for today. But as you mature in your skill, you may mature through that. You may go to a fast action after a few years because of the muscle memory. So, it changes.
I still enjoy a mid-flex. Most of my rods are fast action, but I still enjoy. I mean, it makes me really change. I have to slow way down and
you have to adjust.
Yeah.
But a beginner is going to have to do with muscle structure and personality type.
Mm-hmm.
That's the two things. And that your personality is not going to change. Your muscle structure will.
Right.
Your muscle structure will. And so that's what we have to address, is whether you still have a kid's structure or an adult structure or a senior structure. And then you adjust that action of the rod to that. And if it doesn't make you look good, don't use the rod. I don't care who gave it to you.
I would say the second thing on this, and I know that this was your question to close on, but just a general good rule of thumb is that fly is going to go where you point that rod tip.
It's wherever you do that stop, it's where it's going to go. If you stop it high, it's going to go high. If you stop it medium, it's going to go medium. If you stop it low, it's going to go low. I mean, you can stop it and drop the whole rod to the ground, and it's still going to go where you intended to go.
Yeah. I like the way you put that better than the way that I've been putting it. Those were just some of the things that I was thinking of as we were talking through this, of maybe don't give them your worst rod, your worst fly line. If you care enough about them to teach them to fly fish, then by all means give them something that's good, if you've got it. And then you use your old rod. It's usually your old rod. Use it for a day. Might bring back some good memories. And then the fly goes where you stop the rod. I really like that better. And accuracy is important. I'd rather have somebody accurate than they can cast all the way across the river, because I know they can't mend it across the river. Well, I think, we covered a pretty good bit of stuff here. Wanda, Thank you for stopping by for a chat with us on this topic.
Oh, David, it was always fun when we have conversations together. It gives you an exercise of the mind, man.
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate you being a friend of the podcast too. I mean, you're actually in our Facebook group, and you don't mind jumping in there and helping either. And I do appreciate all the folks that jump in and help on the Facebook group. But I want to make sure that you know that I appreciate you stopping by the Facebook group and offering up suggestions and that sort of thing.
Anytime, I enjoy it.
All right. Well, if you find value in the podcast, share the episode and the podcast with your friends and fishing partners. Drop by the Southeastern Fly store and explore the merch that fuels the Southeastern Fly podcast. Remember, we've got 2 coaching session times available, 2 openings, and the benefits of that can be found on the store. Our guest today was Wanda Taylor, and she's been a professional guide and fly casting instructor since the 80s. She's been a feature angler or host in magazines, on radio, television, video, computer fishing games, and for the second time, she's been a guest on the Southeastern Fly podcast. She's a pro staff member for many of the industry's leading manufacturers. Currently, she's teaching private casting instruction and instructional guiding on the Hiwassee River near Reliance, Tennessee. She's a casting instructor at the Virginia Fly Fishing and Wine Festival, as well as an MC for the women's forum there. You're also a board member and retreat leader for Casting Carolinas. You offer private casting instruction, casting and angling schools for saltwater and freshwater destinations. You can find Wanda's information at WandaTaylorFlyFishing.com. You just listened to Wanda Taylor on the Southeastern Fly podcast. See you next time.